It was supposed to be a peaceful summer evening, kids laughing, the grill sizzling, our backyard oasis. But then she showed up, HOA Karen, with a cement truck. In less than an hour, our entire pool was buried under concrete. But what she didn't know? I had it all on camera, and now the entire neighborhood and the police know the truth. The cement mixer's deafening rumble was what first caught Marcus Dawson's attention that Tuesday morning. He'd been working from home, deeply focused on quarterly projections when the industrial grinding sound pierced through his concentration. Confused, he glanced at his watch, 9:17 a.m., far too early for any scheduled neighborhood maintenance. Marcus pushed back from his desk, his browser tabs of spreadsheets momentarily forgotten as he made his way to the kitchen window that overlooked his backyard pride and joy, a recently completed in-ground pool that had taken nearly 8 months and most of his savings to install. The shimmering turquoise water had been his pandemic project, his salvation during lockdown, and now his favorite place to unwind after stressful workdays. What he saw through the window made his blood run cold. A cement truck was parked in the narrow alley behind his fence, its chute extended over his property line. A crew of 3 men in construction vests were directing a thick, gray stream of quick-setting concrete directly into his pool. The foreman appeared to be consulting a clipboard while pointing at different sections of Marcus's meticulously landscaped backyard. "What the hell?" Marcus shouted, though no one could hear him through the closed window and the grinding machinery. He bolted through the sliding glass door, nearly tripping over his golden retriever, Samson, who had been sunning himself on the deck. Hey, stop," Marcus yelled, waving his arms frantically as he ran across the lawn. "That's my pool. What are you doing to my pool?" The workers looked up, confusion evident on their faces. The foreman, a weathered man with salt and pepper hair, held up his hand to pause the pour. A cement mixer's engine throttled down to an idle. "This is 427 Oakwood Circle, right?" the foreman asked, checking his paperwork. "No, this is 427 Oakwood Lane," Marcus corrected, watching in horror as the thick concrete began to spread across his pool's surface, already obscuring the custom tile work he'd selected with such care. "Oakwood Circle is 3 streets over." "Shit," the foreman muttered, quickly signaling to the operator to shut down completely. "We've got the wrong address." Johnson called the office. But it was too late. Nearly a quarter of Marcus' pool was already filled with rapidly solidifying cement that was beginning to steam as it reacted with the chlorinated water. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Marcus's voice cracked with disbelief. "This pool cost me $85,000. Who authorized this?" The foreman shuffled through his papers. "We have a demolition order signed by," he squinted at the signature, "Patricia Montgomery, HOA board president. Says here the pool was unauthorized and violated covenant restrictions." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Patricia Montgomery. Of course, everyone in the Oakwood Heights community knew HOA Karen, as they called her behind her back. The retirement-age woman who made it her life's mission to enforce every obscure bylaw in the Homeowners Association handbook, no matter how trivial. "I have all the permits," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "I got HOA approval last year. I have the paperwork inside." His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was an email notification from the HOA. *urgente notice of violation. Unauthorized pool installation at 427 Oakwood Lane *. Immediate remediation required *. "This just came in now," Marcus said incredulously, showing the foreman the timestamp. "She sent this while you were already pouring." The foreman's face fell. "Look, buddy, I'm just following orders. We need to call our legal department." Marcus turned to stare at his ruined pool, where the concrete had now created an ugly gray scar across the once pristine blue surface. Samson whimpered beside him, sensing his owner's distress. In the distance, Marcus noticed movement in an upstairs window of the house directly behind his. Through the glass, he could make out Patricia Montgomery's distinctive silver bob as she peered through binoculars at the unfolding disaster in his backyard. And she was smiling. "This isn't over," Marcus whispered, pulling out his phone to document the damage. Not by a long shot. The next 48 hours were a blur of phone calls, emails, and mounting frustration for Marcus. The cement had fully hardened, creating a grotesque gray slab that covered nearly a third of his once beautiful pool. 3 different contractors had already visited, each sucking air through their teeth before delivering the same verdict. This wasn't a simple fix. The entire pool would likely need to be jackhammered out and rebuilt from scratch. "Insurance is denying the claim," Marcus explained to his sister Ellie over video chat, panning his phone camera to show her the disaster zone his backyard had become. Yellow caution tape now surrounded the pool area, and Samson whined whenever they walked near it, as if the dog somehow understood the magnitude of what had happened. "They're saying it's a dispute between me and the HOA, not a covered incident." The construction company is pointing fingers at Patricia for providing false information, and Patricia is insisting I never had proper approval in the first place. Ellie's face on the screen contorted with indignation. But you showed me all the paperwork last year. You jumped through every hoop they asked for. Exactly. Marcus ran a hand through his disheveled hair. He hadn't slept well since the incident, his mind racing with calculations of the financial hit he was facing. But Patricia is claiming the board rescinded the approval at a meeting 3 months ago because the aesthetic wasn't in keeping with neighborhood standards. Conveniently, those meeting minutes aren't in the shared HOA portal. What Marcus hadn't told his sister was that this wasn't his first run-in with Patricia Montgomery. 6 months earlier, she filed a complaint about the color of his mailbox, Oxford blue instead of the mandated navy blue. Before that, she left passive-aggressive notes about his lawn being a quarter-inch too high, but destroying his pool? This was a dramatic escalation even for her. The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Marcus found his next-door neighbor Imani waiting on his porch, holding a thick manila folder. "I think you need to see this," she said without preamble. Inside the folder were copies of emails between Patricia and other HOA board members spanning the past year. Imani's husband worked in it and had been helping the HOA set up their new digital filing system. He wasn't snooping, Imani clarified quickly. These were in the shared drive he was organizing, but when he heard what happened to your pool. Marcus spread the emails across his kitchen counter, his heart pounding as he scanned the exchanges. Asterisk from Patricia Montgomery, asterisk. Asterisk to HOA board, asterisk. Asterisk subject 427 Oakwood Lane. Urgent, asterisk. Asterisk, as I've been saying for months, the Dawson property is becoming a neighborhood eyesore. First the non-regulation mailbox, then the excessive holiday decorations, and now this garish pool installation. While we reluctantly approved his permit against my recommendation, I believe we have grounds to reconsider based on Section 8.3 of the Covenant, asterisk. Asterisk, the property values on our block will plummet if we allow such flagrant violations to continue. I propose immediate action, asterisk. Another email dated just last week. Asterisk from Patricia Montgomery, asterisk. Asterisk to Douglas Wilson, Board Treasurer, asterisk. Asterisk Doug, please expedite the payment to Cornerstone Construction. The mistaken address approach we discussed gives us plausible deniability while addressing the Dawson problem once and for all. Better to ask forgiveness than permission in these matters, asterisk. Asterisk, the money can come from the landscaping fund. We'll sort out the paperwork later, asterisk. Marcus felt the blood roaring in his ears as the full picture became clear. This wasn't a mistake. It was sabotage, premeditated, and executed with cold efficiency. She planned this, he whispered, looking up at Imani. She deliberately had my pool destroyed. Imani nodded grimly. Patricia's been trying to force out homeowners who don't fit her vision for years. Remember the gig reels? The young couple with the twins? They moved after she kept filing noise complaints against their children. Marcus thought of his own house, the first he ever owned, purchased with money saved from years of careful budgeting. The backyard pool that represented countless overtime hours and sacrificed vacations. All of it jeopardized because one woman had appointed herself neighborhood gatekeeper. My brother's a lawyer, Imani said, tapping the folder of evidence. He specializes in property disputes. You should call him. As she left, Marcus stood at his kitchen window staring at the ruined pool. Across the fence, he could see Patricia in her garden meticulously pruning her roses while wearing pristine white gloves. She looked up, locked eyes with him across the distance, and gave him a small, satisfied wave. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed Imani's bra. The conference room of Livingston and Associates felt unnecessarily formal for a Saturday morning meeting. Marcus straightened his tie as Darren Livingston, Manny's brother and now his attorney, laid out printouts of the damning emails across the polished mahogany table. This is textbook malicious property damage, Darren explained, his deep voice carrying the confidence of someone who won similar cases before. The emails establish clear intent. The construction company has already provided a written statement confirming they were deliberately misdirected, and we have the HOA approval documents for your pool with all the proper signatures. So we sue Patricia directly, Marcus asked, studying the preliminary complaint Darren had drafted. Not just Patricia, Darren corrected, sliding another document across the table. We're suing Patricia individually, the HOA as an entity, and the construction company for failing to verify the work order properly. Triple the defendants, triple the pressure to settle quickly. Marcus examined the damages calculation, $85,000 for pool reconstruction, $25,000 for landscaping restoration, $15,000 for emotional distress, plus punitive damages to be determined. The figure made him dizzy. This is more than my annual salary, he murmured. And every penny is justified, Darren assured him. What happened to you wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a calculated attack on your property. The pool was legally permitted, properly installed, and maliciously destroyed through an abuse of HOA authority. As they wrapped up the meeting, Darren's paralegal entered with a manila envelope. This just came by courier. It's from Oakwood Heights HOA. Inside was a formal notice of multiple covenant violations allegedly committed by Marcus over the past year, each carrying substantial fines. The final page included a lion filing against his property for non-payment of these fabricated violations. She's trying to force a quick sale of your house, Darren realized, scanning the document. If these fines stick, the lion would make it impossible for you to refinance or take out a home equity loan to fix the pool. Marcus felt the knot in his stomach tighten. Can she do that? Not legally, no. But it's a classic intimidation tactic. Pile on threats until you give up and move out. Darren added the notice to their evidence pile. This actually strengthens our case. It shows a pattern of targeted harassment. That evening, Marcus returned home to find a small gathering in his driveway. Amanda was there with her husband along with half a dozen other neighbors. They carried casserole dishes, coolers, and most surprisingly, signs reading "Stand with Mercy US" and "HOA tyranny stoked just now." Word got around about what happened, explained David Chen from 4 doors down. Patricia's been terrorizing this neighborhood for years. The Williamses got fined because their toddler's backyard playset was 2 inches taller than regulation. The Paddles had to repaint their front door 3 times because Patricia kept claiming the shade of brown wasn't authentic colonial. We're tired of it. Marcus was touched by the unexpected show of solidarity. As they set up an impromptu potluck on his driveway, more neighbors arrived, each with their own Patricia horror story. By sunset, nearly 20 households were represented. I propose we call an emergency HOA meeting, suggested Eleanor Williams, a retired judge who carried significant respect in the community. The bylaws allow for a vote of no confidence in board leadership if 25% of homeowners petition for it. We have more than enough people here already, David confirmed, counting heads. From across the street, Marcus noticed Patricia watching from her window, phone pressed to her ear. Within minutes, a police cruiser rolled slowly down the street. The young officer who approached seemed almost embarrassed. We got a noise complaint about an unauthorized gathering. Eleanor stepped forward, every inch the formidable judge she'd been for 30 years. Officer, this is a peaceful assembly of homeowners discussing association business on private property, well within noise ordinance limits. She handed him her card. Feel free to contact me if there are further concerns. The officer nodded respectfully and returned to his vehicle without further comment. As the impromptu meeting continued, a strategy took shape. The neighbors would formally petition for Patricia's removal while supporting Marcus's legal action with witness statements about her pattern of selective enforcement and intimidation. She picked the wrong pool to fill with cement, Amani's husband remarked, raising his plastic cup in a toast. Later that night, as the last neighbors departed, Marcus stood in his backyard looking at the moonlight reflecting off the grotesque cement slab. For the first time since the disaster, he felt something beyond rage and helplessness. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 7:00 p.m. in the community clubhouse, but by 6:30, the parking lot was already overflowing. Marcus arrived with Darren carrying boxes of evidence and petition signatures collected over the past week. They'd expected perhaps 30 or 40 residents to attend. Instead, they found nearly 100, practically the entire Oakwood Heights community. "I've never seen this many people at an HOA meeting," whispered David Chen, helping them set up a projector for their presentation. Usually it's just Patricia and her 3 cronies voting on what shade of beige to paint the mailboxes. The crowd hushed as Patricia Montgomery entered, flanked by the remaining board members. Marcus noted how isolated they appeared. Douglas Wilson, the treasurer implicated in the emails, looked particularly uncomfortable, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "I see we have quite the turnout tonight," Patricia remarked coolly, arranging her papers at the head table with precise movements. Her silver bob was immaculately styled, her posture rigid. "Though I must note that proper protocol for emergency meetings requires written notice 2 weeks in advance, not the 5 days provided." Actually, Eleanor Williams spoke up from the front row. Article 7, Section 3 of our bylaws specifically allows for expedited meetings in cases of urgent community concern, requiring only 3 days' notice. As a founding member of this association, I helped write that provision. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Patricia's smile tightened. "Very well. Let's proceed with the standard agenda items." "Point of order," Darren interrupted, rising to his feet. "This emergency meeting was called for a specific purpose, to address allegations of misconduct by the current board president and to hold a vote of no confidence as permitted under our bylaws." For the next 40 minutes, Marcus and Darren presented their case methodically. The emails were displayed on screen, testimonials from affected homeowners were shared, and financial records showed questionable transfers from the HOA accounts to Cornerstone Construction. In summary, Marcus concluded Patricia Montgomery has systematically abused her position to harass homeowners who don't conform to her personal aesthetic preferences, culminating in the deliberate destruction of my legally permitted pool through fraudulent use of HOA funds. The room erupted in applause. When Patricia attempted to respond, her microphone mysteriously stopped working. The community's longtime handyman shrugged apologetically from the back of the room where the sound system controls were located. In the vote that followed, Patricia was removed from the board by a margin of 87-12. Douglas Wilson resigned on the spot, handing over a USB drive containing additional financial records in the interest of full transparency. As the meeting adjourned, Marcus found himself surrounded by neighbors offering congratulations and additional stories of Patricia's reign of terror. "Don't celebrate too early," many cautioned, pulling him aside. "Patricia doesn't strike me as someone who loses gracefully." Her prediction proved accurate. The next morning, Marcus awoke to find a certified letter from Edgeworth and Crane, a prestigious law firm representing Patricia Montgomery personally. The letter alleged defamation, slander, and malicious conspiracy to damage Mrs. Montgomery's reputation through fabricated evidence. It demanded a public retraction of all allegations, reinstatement to the HOA board, and $250,000 in damages. "She's countersuing?" Marcus asked incredulously during an emergency call with Darren. "It's a desperation move," Darren assured him, though his voice carried a note of concern. But Edgeworth and Crane isn't a firm to take lightly. They handle high-profile cases for corporate clients, not HOA disputes. Someone's pulling strings here. That afternoon, while walking Samson, Marcus ran into Eleanor Williams, who was collecting her mail. "I've heard about Patricia's lawsuit," she said, inviting him in for coffee. "There's something you should know." Inside her meticulously organized home office, Eleanor retrieved a folder from a filing cabinet. "Patricia's husband sits on the board of directors for Oakwood Development Corporation." "The company that built this subdivision?" Marcus asked. Eleanor nodded gravely. "And they're planning Phase 3, 60 more homes on the adjacent property. The approval process has been contentious because of wetland concerns. Patricia has been using her position in the HOA to demonstrate community support for the expansion." "How does ruining my pool help with that?" "Your house backs directly onto the proposed construction site," Eleanor explained, showing him a map. "If you were forced to sell because of the pool disaster and mounting HOA fines, homeowner harassment, or development deal gone wrong?" The headline splashed across the evening news chyron as Marcus's story aired. The segment included drone footage of his cement-filled pool, interviews with multiple neighbors, and most damaging, financial documents connecting Patricia's husband's development company to the construction firm that had poured the concrete. By morning, the story had gone viral. Local news gave way to national coverage, with hashtags like #HOAHorror and #ConcreteKaren trending across social media platforms. Marcus's phone rang constantly with interview requests from media outlets and calls from homeowners across the country sharing similar HOA nightmare stories. "The county commissioner's office just called," Darren announced, striding into Marcus's living room where a makeshift headquarters had been established. 3 weeks had passed since the news story broke, and the momentum had only grown. "They're launching an investigation into the permit process for the Phase 3 development. Apparently, there were irregularities in the environmental impact statements." Marcus looked up from his laptop where he'd been responding to emails from a newly formed coalition of HOA reform advocates. "And the restraining order?" "Dissolved," Darren replied with satisfaction. "Judge Hernandez, who, unlike his colleague, has no golf memberships with developers, reviewed our evidence and lifted it this morning. He also denied Patricia's request for dismissal of our lawsuit." The doorbell rang and Amani entered with a folder of papers. As the newly elected HOA president, she had been systematically reviewing years of records. "You won't believe what we found," she said, spreading documents across the coffee table. "Patricia has been selectively enforcing covenant violations against at least 27 homeowners in the past 5 years, all the properties that would be valuable for the Phase 3 expansion." Creating pressure to sell, Marcus nodded, the pattern now crystal clear. And Amani continued, "We discovered 3 separate instances where HOA funds were used for emergency remediation of supposed violations. Your pool wasn't the first target, just the most dramatic." The broader consequences of the media attention came swiftly. Cornerstone Construction was facing license review by the State Contractor Board. Douglas Wilson had turned state's evidence in exchange for immunity, providing detailed testimony about Patricia's systematic abuse of HOA funds. The Development Corporation had publicly distanced itself from the independent actions of Mr. Montgomery, who had been placed on leave pending investigation. But for Marcus, The most significant moment came 1 month after the initial news story, when a courier delivered a settlement offer from Patricia's attorneys. The terms were comprehensive: full restoration of Marcus' backyard to its pre-destruction state, compensation for all legal fees, a public apology, and Patricia's resignation from all HOA activities in perpetuity. In exchange, Patricia would retain the right to remain in the community without harassment. "She's terrified of the civil trial," Darren explained as they reviewed the offer. The discovery process would expose even more connections between the HOA manipulation and the development plans. This is her attempt to contain the damage. Marcus considered the offer carefully. While the financial compensation was generous, something felt incomplete about the resolution. "I'd want one more condition," he told Darren. "The HOA needs to adopt new bylaws preventing this from happening to anyone else." The amended settlement, ratified 2 weeks later at a community-wide meeting, included the Dawson provision, a comprehensive reform package requiring transparent communications, independent oversight of HOA finances, supermajority approval for any enforcement actions, and strict conflict of interest disclosures from board members. 6 months after the cement truck first rolled up to his property, Marcus stood in his backyard admiring the newly reconstructed pool. The water sparkled in the late afternoon sun as neighbors gathered for an impromptu pool party celebrating what local media had dubbed the concrete revolution, a movement that had now spread to HOA communities across 3 states. Eleanor Williams raised her glass in a toast to Marcus, who turned a personal disaster into a catalyst for change. And to neighbors who stand together, Marcus added, clinking his glass against hers. Across the yard, Samson splashed happily in the shallow end with the neighborhood children. The new landscaping was even more beautiful than the original, with native plants selected for sustainability and vibrance.